Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sports Cutting Edge. All thanks to ASTN, the Australian Sports Technologies Network, powering sport through innovation. And I'm very excited to welcome to the show a fellow that I met actually at the ASTN annual report night earlier in the year in Cremorne in Melbourne. Adam Wood is the founder of Safeguarding You. Adam, welcome aboard, mate.
Thank you, Lockie. Awesome to be with you, mate.
Well, I tell you, and we did meet on that night, and straight away, you meet a lot of people, and you have a lot of presence. You got a lot of presence, a lot of je ne sais quoi. So instantly, when I met you, I thought, shit, this bloke is switched on, and that's a big part of it. In this industry, it's pressing the flesh, it's getting out there, and being able to make your business thrive, and that's what you're doing with Safeguarding You, a magnificent platform that you've got all around risk, compliance, governance, specifically for kids in sport. How do we keep kids safe in sport? There's never been a greater focus and more pertinent focus on that, whether it's concussion, whether it's mental health, whether it's keeping safe in terms of all the different historical wrongs that have occurred across the board. You guys are doing a tremendous job in making sure that clubs and individuals adhere to what needs to be done. Adam, mate, let's reflect on your career because you've had a bloody awesome career. You've worked in finance, regulatory tech, you're absolutely an entrepreneur. You were a debt collector at one stage for the NAB, I think. Like, you've done a whole heap of stuff. It's a bloody brilliant career you've built. Can you just let's dial back the clock to when you're 18-year-old Adam Wood and just sort of take us
Mhm.
on the journey between then and now, if you can just encapsulate that, please.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, it's a unique story. Family business really for us. So mum and dad started a business in credit management and debt collection originally, investigation and risk management. And so as an 18-year-old, I tried to avoid the family business for as long as I could, right? What
Yeah.
kid wants to be a debt collector or investigator? Um, but I got into sales and all sorts of things. And then one of Dad's mates from the US was over here, and he made me realize just what Dad had built. And he had a global vision, set up a business in Melbourne, and instead of going to Sydney, he went to Hong Kong, and then set up what became a global partner network into about 100 countries doing receivables management and risk management, due diligence, verification, investigation type work. And so once I sort of understood what he built, and the opportunity to be the second generation, successor or CEO of the business, I threw myself into that. Go back about 10 years ago. And so I had to learn all the bits and pieces of the business, right? Everything from, calling and collections to field services and investigations and repossessions and all the ugly stuff. But what I'd learned was comprehensive credit management and risk management. Took over the business about 8 years ago, I guess, as CEO, and I could see the writing on the wall for us as a global vendor to Fortune 500 companies in the banking world and, all around the world. And compliance for them was a massive issue. And of us as a vendor, we needed to show that we were compliant with cybersecurity, data protection, quality management standards. And because we were a partner network made up of mostly SMEs or small and medium businesses, and a lot of them in emerging markets like Asia and Africa and Latin America, compliance was not known in these markets. And so just to keep our clients, we needed to show them that we were compliant, which meant we needed to upskill our partners on what compliance meant, right? What are standards? Well, how do you visualize and evidence that to your clients? We looked all around the world for a compliance framework, primarily for SMEs, because there's lots of enterprise GRC or governance, risk and compliance tools, but nothing for small business, and there still isn't. And so we went on this journey to try and build a tool to help upskill our partners and then show our clients that we're compliant. That was the original intention. A couple of the banks said, "Hey, can we license this off you? Because what you've touched on is third party, risk management, vendor liability, vicarious risk management." And so we went on this long journey trying to turn this tool that we built for ourselves into what became a startup. And so the origins were around trying to solve a governance, risk, and compliance solution or problem for small business. And that was okay. We built the tech and the tech was amazing. But going after the cyber world, it's a really sophisticated and saturated market. And same with workplace relations and sustainability were sort of the areas that we originally played in. And then a couple of years ago, the child safety standards or the Victorian child safe standards came into force. And so we thought, oh, well, let's make a program out of that. Because outside of work, I was the VP of my son's basketball club. I was heavily involved in his footy club. My sister, who's my COO, because we're still very much a family business, she outside of work is very much in the theatre and the arts world. And so we could see a problem coming that most non-profits and most of these sport, arts and recreation sectors are going to struggle to comply with or even understand what these new standards meant. And so we took the understanding of the framework and what the requirements were and made a program out of it. And that's sort of snowballed into us realizing, hang on, here's a real world problem that no one's solving, and we can do something unique. And so we pivoted the platform and the brand, I guess, and really focused on safeguarding, kids from harm, abuse, and neglect. And then the concussion standards or protocols have come out. Mental health is a big issue. So we're really now same tech, same platform, but very much built around the safeguarding community sport, arts, and recreation.
Mate, congratulations and congratulations. What's your dad's name? We should give your dad a shout out
Neil,
too.
Neil Wood,
Neil.
Neil, and mum. She's a massive part of the business.
Yeah, what's mum's
Kathy,
name? Kathy. So to
Kathy,
Neil and to Kathy Wood, absolutely sensational. And your sister?
Leanne,
Leanne.
Leanne, the
Neil,
one that's in the
Kathy, and
business,
Leanne.
and then I've got Leanne, Jody, and Clint are my other siblings, but they're not in the business.
Mate, I love it that family aspect to it, and good on you for carrying the baton on into the next generation, yourself and Leanne, after what all Neil and Kathy did. Absolutely, very very cool. Um,
Mm.
it's interesting that we were talking about this because I just recently I was did a conference in Anaheim in California, and I had the very great privilege of interviewing Jerice Colon, and she's the boss of Safe Sport USA. And essentially, Safe Sport USA was brought in. Really, it became a more of a prescient issue after the revelations around Larry Nasser and what had happened in terms of child abuse in the
Mhm.
United States setup with gymnastics. And so, as a consequence of that, the Safe Sport has had a prerogative to be able to go into all sports, all US Olympic, Paralympic sports, and to essentially clean the joint up and to make sure that the compliance is absolutely resolute. And it sounds very much to me like you're doing the same sort of thing and to ensure that there is that safety for kids, the most vulnerable people, keeping them out of harm's way. So, Adam, can you tell us what have you learnt out of this process? In terms of the way that situations were happening inside of clubs and leagues, and how you've tried to create a better situation for our kids out there.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, amazing, mate. Really interesting. And yeah, I'm very aware of safe sports and what the US are doing. Look, I guess for us, clubs and community clubs, grassroots clubs are the problem we're trying to solve. Are made up of brilliant people, volunteers. I know you met with Courtney, he's a really good mate of mine from Firefly Initiative. It's a massive problem to solve around the volunteers and clubs, but trying to provide some level of governance. When these standards came in, I was the VP of my son's basketball club. And so I just started asking questions, and very few people knew what was happening. There was no tools, there was no resources. Leagues and codes were reasonably slow to react to providing guidelines and any sort of advice on it. And that's changed now. Sports are, most of the codes are pretty good on providing resources. But what we found, especially when I moved over to the footy club, my son's junior footy club, was that nobody knew how to manage it. And if you look at, say, footy and AFL, they've got incredible resources on play.afl, but there's 6,000 of them, and you don't know where to start or you don't know where to end. And so for us, it was, because we built this other platform and we were trying to solve this problem for small businesses, we realized that how-to resources and systems to manage was the problem. There wasn't a lack of intent or interest, or in some cases, education and awareness, because most what now we know as CSOs or child safety officers are incredible teachers, police officers, child protection officers. They know what to do. They know how to safeguard clubs. But it was about providing a systematic layer of governance for the executive committees and the other committees, and then getting your coaches and your TMs and your trainers all on the same board. And so that was where we saw an opportunity to help clubs. And there wasn't really, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't really any platforms and tools that are made fit for purpose for a non-profit small sporting organization.
And in terms of the way that you deliver that, because as I say, you know what it's like to be on the management side or the voluntary side, with your son's basketball team. How did you try and tailor make it so that what you were doing was transferable, so it was relatable, so that it was digestible for people that are working, volunteering their time. They're already doing full-time jobs and they're trying to make
Yep.
ends meet, and then they've got to try and roll out a training and game day and help out for their kids' clubs. I mean, how do you make it malleable so that it practically can work?
Yep. Awesome question, because I guess we start with it being a continuous improvement journey, right? This isn't something like compliance is often tick and flick. Oh, I've done this thing, I'll put a poster on a wall, or I've created a policy, it sits on my website, and I'll forget about it for a few years. The idea was to make it a continuous improvement platform. And so it starts with what is the standard, right? First thing, we need to comply with the standards. And fortunately, the different sports have contextualized that to different codes. And so the Victorian Child Safe Standards is very rigid in its 11 standards, and it's all about, cultural inclusion and parental inclusion and online, offline, physical, on field, off field. But the codes themselves have really made it contextual. So what we've done and where we started with was the AFL produced an AFL safeguarding implementation guide. And so all we did was take that guide, which has already made it relevant to clubs, and we turn it into a program. And that starts with an assessment. So you do an assessment, you get a risk report, which says, okay, based on your answers, here's your high, medium, and low risks that you need to address. It might be policy, it might be awareness, it might be comms, it might be whatever the issue is. And then we provide an action management module, which says, okay, here's the thing you should do. Here's your recommended actions. This is what it should look like. And importantly, here's a direct link to download that thing or to do that thing. It's really tailored help and curated content that's already out there. We're not trying to be the subject matter expert of safeguarding per se, because the AFL have their preferred policies and guidelines and resource materials. So do basketball, so do cricket, so do netball. And so what we're doing is taking the subject matter that the codes themselves have published and that they wish their participants to comply with and to learn and benefit from. And we just put it into a system that helps a club start with an assessment, get a risk report, and start to improve areas in their own time. Because you're right, it's volunteers, mate. They may not have great amount of time, and so that's part of what we're working on now is how do we help those administrators or those volunteers or the CSOs get the most out of the platform? What support networks can we build around that? And so what we've taken to leagues now is not just a platform, because that's great, but we've created a program where we say, let's create a CSO network at a league level. So let's bring all the CSOs from the clubs within a league, and let's bring them together on a Zoom call once a month, once every couple of months, to share best practices, to help unify what are our challenges, what are our objectives, and some clubs are more prepared than others need more help, and so we have this CSO network as a starting point. Then we roll out the platform to help the clubs work through the compliance or the requirements. And then we're looking to develop a community of practice each year where we bring people together, bring experts in, and really get into the weeds of some of the more tricky issues that need to be tackled with experts who can provide advice and guidelines. So the platform's sort of the middle piece to what is a broader solution we're trying to bring to leagues and clubs.
And in terms of when, a club will do that initial assessment so you guys can get some eyes on where perhaps they can improve and what they're doing well, in terms of the way that that assessment is then reviewed at your end, at the safeguarding you end, is that an AI thing, or have you got human eyes on it that go through and make those decisions about where the
Yep.
improvements need to be made?
Yeah, great point. So yeah, humanize because it needs to be humanized to begin with, but we're
Yeah.
already working on AI models to be able to provide better assessments and I guess reviewing and improvement. But it's very much a personal approach. It's every club's different. We're using AI and from the tech piece, we're using that as part to develop the programs and to do the recommendations and the remediation and improvement areas. But no, it's very much a hands-on approach by us and our team. But also we're there to educate and upskill the leagues and the club development officers and the CSOs at the clubland. So that's why the CSO network's a really important part, because as we scale and we start to bring on tens and hundreds of leagues, our resources, it's more about upskilling the leagues and the people within the league to be able to share best practices themselves.
And it's amazing the way in which, over recent time, there has been a more professionalisation of these things. It's funny, back in the day when I was a reporter, the word governance was front and centre with the Essendon Football Club with their supplement saga. And I spent a long time standing at the front of Windy Hill on very cold mornings in the middle of winter, trying to interview people that were alleged to have not been so great with the governance there at that club
Mhm.
at that time. How are you finding it now? Like, obviously that's a professional football club in the AFL, one of the biggest sporting clubs in Australia that, had some questionable situations with governance. How do you find it now, Adam, with all the different clubs and leagues you're dealing with? Where are we at on a governance scale? Are things being done well? How is it situated?
Yep. Yeah. Look, I'm a long-suffering Bombers fan, mate. So
Oh,
I took particular interest in that story. And I won't get into it, but I know what you mean. Look, at a grassroots level, I think different sports, different codes do it very differently.
mm,
I was really encouraged. So for us trying to roll this out, go back 2 years ago, I was on the committee of the Frankston Dolphin Junior Footy Club.
yeah.
Last year, I was the VP, and when I came on, it was to help out with the child safety stuff. Once I got into VP, I started talking to the leagues, and I was asking a lot more questions from the FDJFL or our league, and then I started asking questions of AFL Southeast and AFL Vic, and went into to AFL House to start asking questions about where's the help and resources. I can see that there's lots of point to here and go and do this thing, but often there's a carrot and a stick approach, and we needed more of a carrot to help and give the clubs the resources. How we went from club land to league land, once we'd rolled the program out, I just sort of tested it on our club. And then I spoke to a few other presidents and CSOs at other clubs and said, hey, just try this platform out, see if it helps, right? Because first thing I didn't want to do is shoehorn something in that wasn't a solution to a problem. So we sort of validated it at clubland. And then we took it to league and said, well, look, now we've got these testimonials of sorts. We know that it works from a club perspective. From a league perspective, what we'd like to do is not have a cost input on the clubs. If we can find a way to fund this from a government level, from corporate sponsors or partners, or the leagues themselves directly fund it for the clubs, we know there's an interest and a desire because we've got the feedback from CSOs now. Instantly, I heard that one of the quotes from the one of the board members from the league was that, this is only the cost of a couple of footies. What club can't justify that cost themselves directly? In the end, they funded it, which was incredible, and so that they could mandate it. So I think there's an awareness now, not least because in Victoria, it's the law, right? This isn't a nice to have. This is absolutely a must have. I think we're seeing now that there is lawsuits appearing now, especially more in the concussion lens. But you made the point about, on the spectrum of child safety, the worst case is obviously abuse and harm for kids. We're seeing almost every day or every week, we're seeing articles and headlines around, convictions around child abuse. In concussion now, you're seeing local footy clubs getting sued by past players for mishandling concussion in the same realm as what the class action suits are happening with the AFL and NRL and whatnot. So I think there's a much greater awareness about the problem and seemingly a much greater appetite to do something about it because, one league has led on to the other. I'm now sitting on the AFL Southeast Safeguarding Subcommittee. They've created a new subcommittee now to really tackle this because they recognise it's a big challenge. And not just it's not just that I've got to do this thing. It's if you think about it, and compliance is always a pain in the neck for a lot of people, and it's that I'll get to it one day. If you want to grow participation at your club, what better way than to advocate to the parents around there that we're the safest club for your kid to be? And so it's about minimizing risk, but it's also about showing the kids and the families and the community that you as a club take this seriously, ultimately to drive participation. So I think we can see there's the top-down regulatory litigation, legal side of things, but there's also just good people want to do good things. And as we're saying, things are moving pretty quickly, and we've gone from footy now into basketball, and we're talking of rugby and cricket and tennis and netball and whatnot. So it seems to be every conversation leads to another one, which is pretty encouraging.
Absolutely. And so from the sound of it, like as you say, there can be that tick and flick mentality to compliance. So there is a more meaningful, genuine engagement in this, Adam, you're seeing?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As I say, just from the experience with the leagues that we're working with now, and where that's gone to, I think at the highest levels, whether it be legal litigation or legal liability that's driving it, or whether it be community goodwill and social value, either way, we're starting to see, at every committee meeting, safeguarding's on the agenda as it should be and as it must be. But I think we're finding that all the way from club committees to league committees up to up the food chain into state and national sporting organisations. So yeah, it's certainly something we're seeing. Hopefully, in the next 12 months, we'll see major movement and traction on this because, like anything, some cogs are slow to turn when it comes to decision making of this sort of a level, but no, things are moving pretty quickly.
That's excellent. And in terms of the funding that you touched on, like you said there, you had a particular league you were dealing with said, well, the club should be able to do this, but we will wear the cost.
Mm.
How are you seeing it more broadly across all your different clients? Is it that league pays for the clubs? Is it club pays themselves? I know you mentioned corporate sponsorship, so maybe it's a it's a Bunnings or a Coles that roll out a program in partnership with you. Like, how do you see it moving forward as you
Yep.
further grow the business
Yeah,
across
so the
Australia?
preference, yeah, so look, we're seeing the leagues fund and wish to fund it because also for them it's a governance function, right? If they
Right.
can, they want to be able to prove that we're minimizing risk and minimizing incidents and providing better community engagement around safeguarding. So for them to fund it, they can then roll it out and effectively mandate it across their clubs because it's not a cost input onto the clubs themselves. And then we can share some anonymized data with the leagues to say, well, these are the clubs that are shooting the lights out, and here's some clubs that might need more help. And so it's not a punitive approach, but the leagues would like to know data so that they can see which clubs need more help and assistance or advice around these areas. So the leagues funding is the model that we're rolling out now. However, we're starting to see strong support from corporates because we want to scale this quicker than perhaps what we can do so if we're putting a bill towards each league. So that's a two-tiered approach, but the idea would be to have corporates fund this so we can go to a league and say there is no cost to you at all. We're just going to roll this out because then it's a no-brainer. So we're closer to that than certainly we were a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, more news on that to come.
Yeah, very nice. And amongst that corporate marketplace, you're finding there's an appetite there to be a part of it. From that ESG
Yeah.
perspective, it's a win
Yep.
for them. Yeah. How are you sort of trying to prosecute the case to get them on board?
Yeah, so it's like you say, CSR and ESG or corporate social responsibility, and the ESG is an obvious metric for those that want to advocate for that.
Hmm.
Um, a lot like anything, brand enhancement, brand value, like any sponsorship or that sort of role is having brand value in the community. So that's one of the elements. But
Hmm.
data-driven insights, trying to improve community sentiment. In some worlds, the data both ways can share. So insurance and insurance providers going to want to see we can help them minimize, and reduce claims. So that's an incentive there. The approach isn't to say we want to come and share everything with you. It's about when you invest or partner with us, that you can sponsor clubs. So we say for X amount, you can sponsor X amount of clubs, which will have a benefit of contributing to 10,000, 40,000 kids. And so it's community goodwill, it's the social goodwill, and then obviously the brand enhancements and value that comes from that. And it's only an early approach, but because we're still relatively early in our go to market. So
Yeah.
we've confirmed it, we've validated it at clubs, we've validated at leagues. Now it's about how do we spread that and scale it as quickly as possible. And so it's only in the last 2, 3 weeks that we've really formalized what is that partner model, what does the sponsorship look like. And fortunately, the few conversations we've had are all opening new doors.
Well, I mean, you've hit the ground running. That's the thing, and obviously you've got such a strong underpinning from your existing the family business been going for a long, long time. So you've got that strong architecture, and then you've been able to specifically apply it to sport and to kids in sport, which is just magnificent. And like as I say, your growth is at a rate of knots. In terms of the specifics around some of the content that you offer, can you give us an insight into the mental health perspective for kids and the way in which sport can so often be a wonderful alleviator of problems that otherwise kids would have. We
Mhm.
see now record numbers of kids with mental health circumstances, particularly driven by cyberbullying, social media, all this sort of stuff. Like, what sort of content are you delivering to clubs? And often, perhaps the clubs are run by people who have a little out of touch with what's going
Yep.
on in that, in every kid's pocket, there's a phone and there's so much going on those phones. And
Yep.
how are you using sport and through your content and messaging to try and help have a positive impact on these kids, mate?
Yep. So there's really good providers already out in this space. And again, one thing that we're really mindful of is we don't want to step on toes. We don't want to try and recreate something that's already in the market. And so you might be familiar with the Tackle Your Feelings program through the AFL. They've rolled out a mental health program where they come out to clubs and they do a training session or a workshop and they try and facilitate conversations around that. Outside the locker rooms, another really good provider that does something similar. So we're not trying to recreate that. What we've done is our programs, but the program for now, and we're working hopefully very soon, we'll be releasing a more sporting code-based program. But mental health officially is psychosocial hazards. If you think through it at a state-based regulatory framework in the workplace, companies are required to comply with now and to be very mindful of and aware of psychosocial hazards, which is mental health. So the frameworks already exist around how to identify and how to address and how to minimize from an organizational level. Again, we're not trying to be the training provider because companies like eTrainU, Tackle Your Feelings, and some of these organizations already do the training really well. So we wish to partner with them at a level. What we're providing is a governance layer for the club executives to say, have we done these things? These are the requirements, and then to take action on doing those things. So in some cases, it might be around doing workshops without working with our partners or others in the marketplace who can deliver the training or the in-club workshops to improve it. What we're providing is a governance layer to be able to say, are you doing these things? Are you aware of these things? And how can we help implement them if you haven't already done that?
And in terms of building those partnerships out with, as you say, whether it's E-Train, you tackle your feelings, etc., how do you go about that? What's sort of your approach, your strategy moving forward to take it, not only nationally but potentially internationally with what you're doing?
Yep. Yeah, that's the plan, mate. Look, if you look in the concussion lens, so Connectivity is one of the great providers out of WA who provide an online LMS, short courses around concussion awareness. And so they're just a recent example of one that we're partnering with. It's simply find a relevant, credible provider or partner or prospective partner that provides a meaningful solution that we get to know and trust, and then we have a partner marketplace. So baked into the platform is you'll do the assessment. You part of the remediation or the improvement through our action management module is download this link or download this white paper, or follow this link to download a white paper or whatever the information that might be. But also go to our marketplace and engage with one of these marketplace providers. And so if it's a training provider, if training is the thing you need to do relevant to the framework, we would recommend and introduce you to a partner. So when we approach them, it's a two-way relationship, preferably. Otherwise, it can be a one-way, like Connectivity. We don't expect anything from them in return. They are they're recognised by the AIS and the Australian Sports Commission. They are a recognised concussion training provider. So we just want to refer our users to them because our users will benefit from them. Other partners, when there's a two-way relationship, if they see value in our platform and refer users to us, then we have a relationship there. But it's just a two-way relationship with someone that we get to know. Unlike, say, you look at Zero Marketplace and AWS, where there's marketplace and there's thousands of providers in there. We only put people in our marketplace that we know and that we trust and that we can recommend with confidence. So it's slowly at this stage growing, but that's the plan, is to find a partner where we can work together.
Definitely. And I mean, so much of it is building those partnerships. So, as you say, whether it's the ancillary businesses that help feed in content, like what you mentioned, the corporates to help to fund it. From the sound of it, you've got a strong relationship with the AFL, the league itself, and to be able to then have things funnel down from top to bottom. Is that a big approach as well with, with cricket, basketball, netball, other sports? I mean, how big is that to be able to lock in the top dog and then allow that to feed on through into the grassroots?
Yep, it's our go-to-market, mate. You got to have, so the way we look at it, it's top-down and a bottom-ups approach. If I go to the national sporting codes and I haven't proven it at a club and at a league level, why would they adopt it? The AFL, because I was in that, right? It was because I was on the committee. It was because I was very much in the AFL world, and there would seem to be great appetite even up through AFL house that conversation happened. But it's the same approach with basketball. We've got our first league. We've got the clubs. We've got the league. We're now, Basketball Victoria, Basketball Australia's conversations we're starting to have. And so it's about recognising that, yes, we need the top-down governance and we need I guess, the endorsement of the codes. But at a grassroots community club level, it's got to be done by the clubs and the leagues. They're the ones who run themselves. And so whilst the AFL might be supportive and encouraging of these programs, it's really the leagues and, say, the AFL regions that are going to help execute and deliver this at a grassroots level. So it's really a tops down and a bottom up approach.
All right. So if let's hypothetically, I'm the president of my local career club and the league that we're a part of says, right, safeguarding you, we are doing this program with them. So get ready. And then I'm thinking, all right, what have I got to do? So for me and for the people on the committee and for the coaches and the parents, perhaps, how does it work tangibly? What's going to happen to me as I come into this cricket summer? What's going on, Adam? What's happening to me as the president?
Yep, brilliant. No, so the first thing would be you get your CSO and your president probably would be the two most likely people that would be involved in this.
Yeah.
They would sign up for the platform. They would do the assessment. The coaches and the TMs and everybody else would be downstream from this. The first thing is about having it at the top level of the executive or the committee conducting the assessment. Then they work through the assessment from the risk report. They'd see where, where their high, medium, and low risks are. And once they start working through the action management, it's about little things like putting posters up. It's about making ultimately all this safeguarding. If you wanted to boil it all down, is to make all the kids feel that they are heard. That's the most
Mm.
significant point, is that kids constantly understand that their voice matters and that there's mechanisms through which for them to do that. And so whether that be online, having anonymous report forms, having drop boxes, and but really it would start by the executive and the CSO that would conduct the assessment. Then they would start to implement the measures, having policies, communicating those policies, bringing the coaches and TMs in to say, hey guys, safeguarding's a thing for us. As a club, we want to, it's a real priority for us. And we need you to be our champions of that, because the CSO and the president, the VP and the executive, they're going to have very little day-to-day contact with the children. And so it's about, once the club have got their governance structures right, then it's about recruiting the coaches and the officials, I guess, the game day officials that deal constantly with the kids, to understand in principle what that is and to convey that message to the kids. And it's not about scaring them. It's just about making sure the kids feel comfortable that they are heard and their voice matters.
It's a great mantra, actually. That's what it boils down to. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the kids, that they feel their voice is heard. I mean, it's actually, you put it quite beautifully, to be honest. Because I mean, whether it's concussion or mental health or any other sorts of situations that a kid might, be afflicted by, I think you boil it down beautifully. And in terms of that, so once again, so the CSO, Safety Officer, and the President, they're doing the module. So it's an online module, Adam. So I'm filling it out, and then I submit it, and then is it a week later, or that
No,
comes
no, no.
back?
So it's an online, it's a full online SaaS tool, right? So you would sign up for it just like you would any other platform. The first thing you'll do is the assessment. Once you complete the assessment, it'll move you over to the risk report. The risk report will tell you in real time where are you at, and importantly, we've got a risk score, right? So when you finish the assessment, 100 is bad, 0 is perfect, and somewhere in between is where you will land. And
Yeah,
so what if I land at 40% or 80%, then my objective is to try and reduce that score by doing these things. And so once you've seen your risk report, you'll open the action management module. So it's all automated. It's just step by step by step. The action management module says, okay, here's the recommended action, here's what it should look like, and here's the helpful resource to help you do that thing.
mm,
Within that, it's got a task manager, so you can create tasks and assign it to different people. You can create notes, attach documents, and it's really the home for where all of your IP goes as a club around safeguarding or concussion. The other important part is it's for transitioning, right? No committee is around forever, and so if a CSO comes in or a president's in, and they move on, how do you transfer that knowledge around the important aspects of safeguarding? Well, it's all in this system, and so all you do is you hand over the login details and you transition that to the new people, and then they would effectively do the same thing. They could look through the assessment, they could look through the risk report, they can find all the relevant evidence. So it's really important about transitioning committee from committee to committee. But yeah, it's all online. In theory, a club doesn't have to talk to us. The whole thing is self-help, and it just takes you from step one to step three, four, five. And then the idea of the continuous improvement is you keep revisiting it to improve in areas that you may not have been able to tackle. Some things are easy, right? Like print off a poster, stick it all around the club. So there's the awareness issue addressed in some way. Some things are more tangible around training and really recruiting and advocating and upskilling your coaches and your officials and TMs and whatnot to be able to. And so some things will take more time to implement and execute.
mm.
But that's the whole point. Come back to the platform. Incident reporting. We're just about to launch our incident reporting module, which is a massive. Most of the clubs we've spoken to said, geez, this would be great if we could manage that, because right now, every Monday and Tuesday at a club land is a nightmare, because
Yeah.
especially in footy world, you've got on field, you've got off field, you've got issues all the time coming up. And good clubs will have incident report. It'll sit on a Google Drive or a OneDrive, and they will manage it via email, but it's a mess. If you look back in a year and go, well, how many incidents did we have and how were they handled, and who was communicated, and what action was taken? Who do we refer them to? That would be a headache to put together. Well, that's all coming in the system. Hopefully next week we'll be dropping that module. So it's trying to be that risk management tool, but primarily around safeguarding. But now the concussion issue is the new one. And so there's different objectives around the concussion, because as you'd know, with the new concussion guidelines that have come out in this 21 days,
Yeah.
fantastic that they're making a stance on this. But what we're seeing at game day is it's encouraging underreporting. So we're trying to make that something that's more systematic and more manageable as well.
There's a few things to get into there. Geez, your answers are great. There's so much substance. You know, it's funny because we do different interviews at times, and sometimes people give you a little bit, sometimes people give you a lot. And I appreciate the fact that you're really fleshing out exactly what you guys do, and it's a magnificent product you've got, and the tangible difference is absolutely sensational. Because, as I say, there can't be anything more important than kids and kids' safety. So, with the concussion, how are you going to try and defeat this underreporting thing? What can you do systematically to try and vent that?
Yep. So it starts by clubs understanding what are these new guidelines. And so the AIS, the Australian Sports Commission, came out with their 21-day guideline or 21-day reporting guidelines. And the AFL effectively adopted that same model. A lot of clubs have heard about it, but don't necessarily know. And if you go and you can go and just Google and find the concussion guidelines, but what do you do with that? How do you internalize it? How do you localize it at a club level? Well, that's what our program is initially designed to do. Bring that awareness to the committee level, because that's it's all got to start at the executive. What we then encourage, and we're working on this with the AFL and with other sports now, is how do you prevent that under reporting? It's a challenge because white line fever exists. Coaches, in finals, we've seen it. You want your best players out on the field. Kids don't want to, they want to shake it off and get back on. And a lot of parents want their kids to get back on the field as well. So it's no one silver bullet to this. But what we think and what we're looking to recommend and introduce is a club policy that says, to the effect of where the executive can reinforce to their coaching group that underreporting will not be accepted, and that there will be penalties or sanctions applied if it is found that you are not recognising the need to report a player and test a player. Now there's protocols around concussion. There's a concussion recognition tool so you don't have to be a medical practitioner or a concussion expert to conduct a baseline test, or sorry, a sideline test, to see whether there are symptoms and signals of concussion, of which then you should refer them to a doctor to get a diagnosis. And if the diagnosis is confirmed, well, then the 21-day return to play triggers in. So there's a clear process, but most people wouldn't understand what that process is. So first thing for us is simplify that and allow clubs to understand it, and then they can implement practices that they wish to do at their club, because every club's is in control of their own policies and procedures and practices. But we'd like to encourage everybody towards the best practice version of what that might mean. We're working on building a concussion medical network. So, one of the things now is that a general practitioner, well, the idea was to get a return to play, a GP needs to return you to play. Most GPs wouldn't know the first thing about concussion, or very little of it. And you've got physios who aren't technically recognised by the authorities to return to play, who are many of them are eminently qualified around concussion. So what we're trying to do is build a network so we can say to clubs, when one of your kids has a suspected concussion, here's a network of people that we know what it's about and can give an appropriate diagnosis, and then a return to play protocol. So there's layers to it. I wish I had a more simple answer for you, but this is the next can of worms that we're trying to unpack and address, because you don't have to look far in professional sport and AFL to see the impact. CTE now, if anybody hasn't seen the movie Concussion with Will Smith, I urge them to see it, because you can visualize the why concussion matters. It's not just it's just a head knock, he'll be fine. Consecutive concussion can lead to CTE, and you look at Angus Brayshaw and Nathan Murphy and so many of these players now that we've seen that kids can relate to. So I'm finding that kids can relate to it because it's not Deezer Williams and John Barnes and all these older players that they can't relate to. Now there's kids or younger players they can relate to. They can see the impact of it. It's more about having an education and awareness for parents, for coaches, for TMs, that it's not okay to just ignore the signs of a potential concussion.
Well, you're so correct. I mean, it is the ticking time bomb of sport, and you have the gigantic class action suit in America with the NFL, and obviously, as you mentioned, in Australia as well. And, the impact, yeah, and you make the great point that having modern day players does help to resonate with kids. But, you look at the impact Danny Frawley, one of the most wonderful people, in Australian
Yep.
sporting history, and the tragic situation for himself, and
Yep.
Wally Lewis, the king of rugby league, and when he came out last year with that 60 Minutes interview and revealed that he's essentially going to die as a consequence of the repeated head knocks. He has dementia,
Hmm.
and he said that men, playing sport need to get rid of the bravado, and so
Yeah.
you have all these sort of pivotal examples, and to be able to try and make a meaningful impact, and particularly at grassroots, Adam, because obviously under the bright lights of AFL or NRL, they will get it right, but it's the kids that are copping these situations out of the spotlight. That's where there really does need to be that oversight. So the fact that you are in there with your sleeves rolled up making a difference is huge. With that, you make the great point, the juxtaposition between doctors that are qualified but perhaps don't have strong knowledge, the GP, around concussion, physios that aren't technically deemed to be a decision maker in this regard but have a lot of knowledge and experience with it. How are you going with building that network of authorised officials? How have you made much progress there?
Yeah, 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 good, really good. I mean, there's some, it's for those who do have experience, they make themselves well known. And so we've been able to form a network. We'd like it to make it way more comprehensive. And actually talking with Connectivity, this concussion training provider out of WA, I believe, I hope I'm not speaking out of school, but they're trying to roll out a program to upskill GPs and provide better training to them at a national level. So we will start to see more GPs more competent in this area. We've partnered with with a couple of providers, one in Melbourne here, the Concussion and Head Group. Cliff Butler, who's more an eminently qualified. Alan Pearce is a guy who's an eminently qualified concussion expert. So we're just trying to build a network of experts. So firstly, that I can upskill, mate. Go back 6 months ago, I had nothing. I knew nothing about concussion really, other than what we all knew about it from just watching, professional football or professional sport. So firstly, I need to upskill myself and do the courses myself so I understand it, and so then I can try and convey it and relate it. And one of the great things about this is about concussion is why these return to play protocols are so important is that if you have a concussion and you have another one and another one, it's not the end of the world as long as you have you put in place the time to recover and come back and return to play in a graded fashion so that the brain's got time to recover. It's not the end of the world. It's not like concussion leads to CTE, so therefore we should cancel all sport, which
Mm.
some out there wish to advocate for. So it's just it's trying to understand it and relate it and then convey it, and then provide a network. And we're always adding to that network as it becomes more known to us. And obviously, the more known we become, the more known some of those providers become to us as well. So yeah, just still a work in progress, mate.
Well, good on you for doing the work, because I think it'll go down when we look back at it. A business like yours will be one of the pivotal linchpins in keeping sport going in this regard, so that it doesn't we just play touch footy or something and have no contact, because there's two extremes. There's the one where you give it away altogether, or there's the one where it's the wild, wild west as it has been in the past. Neither of those extremes are desirable. So to be able to find the right balance where kids can play and love and enjoy sport, but also have that safety and that assurity of their future to the best extent possible, I think you're doing bloody good work, mate. I mean, I just want to come back to also, so once again, so say club president of this career club, and I do the assessment and the club's going no good. I've been a very bad president, evidently. I get a score of 80%. 0% was what I was going for. 100% means we might as well pack up. I'm at 80%. So how, in terms of me fixing the club and then remaining accountable to the program, so that the program and so that my league can see that I'm fixing up what's wrong, how does that work in terms of me implementing change and then being held accountable for that change?
Yep. So the action management module was one of the modules. So once you get past the assessment, you look at the risk report, you go into the AMM or the action management module. That's where you start to work through each of the issues, and you can download the thing, you can rewrite the policy, you can put your posters up, you can convey messages to your community or your officials, and then there's, as I said, there's a take action button, which once you've done the thing, once you've fixed the thing, you then mark the statement as complete, and then you would re-answer it. You'd say, well, instead of saying no, I don't do this thing, you'd say yes, I do have done this thing, and here is my evidence of having done that thing. You would mark the statement as complete. And as you change that, your risk score goes down. So you're constantly reducing your risk score as you're completing all the various things that you need to do as a club. So it depends how much time and resources you have available. Some clubs can get through this and can do it all in a week. I've seen clubs in our league down here that are really, they've got a strong appetite for it. They'll do the assessment in 10 minutes. And then it's a matter of, well, how much time do you want to put into, or can you put into improving these areas of weakness that we're providing you the pathways to do? So it's constantly evolving. Now, in terms of reporting back to the league would get a level, it would get information around what progress have you made and what risk score are you. And so again, it's not a punitive approach, but the league would then say, well, great, these clubs have clearly shown enthusiasm. They've completed the assessment. They've worked on their risk score, and they've remediated. Fantastic. These ones, not so much. They're the ones that the league would go and help. And so whether it be us, so firstly, it's our platform, they're our users, they're not the league's users. So first thing, we will be on the phone, we will be by email, we will be supporting them, right? That's the first thing. Secondarily, you'll have the CSO network. And this is why we want it to be a league approach, because the league can then first create this CSO network. And so that's the forum through which we communicate and we do demos on the platform and we can talk through the issues. So for everyone on the call in that CSO network meeting call, they may not have done the thing that others are talking about, but they learn how to do it. And so, like, not everybody wants to be overt and outward on these calls. Others are more happy to just participate and listen. Fantastic, they all learn. That's the point. And so, you'll always have your champions in that network that'll be there. And then it's not even just about us being a support network. The other CSOs in that CSO network will help other clubs, because the really interesting thing we found is that at grassroots clubs, there's a lot of deep-seated historical hatred between clubs, right? Whether it be on field, off field, sponsorship, whatever it is, right? And I've learned that more over the last few years. At a CSO level, there's none of it. I've seen it we spoke on safeguarding at the AFL Southeast Club Development Conference down in the Mornington Racecourse earlier this year. And we had a room of CSOs, and I've never seen anything like it in a footy club sense. Everybody was so supportive of each other. They were there because they're there to obviously help kids and provide a safer environment. They don't care about the historical wins and losses or the whatever animus there might be, from the club. So that it's something different, which is I found really encouraging, because sometimes game days are a real pain to manage, and incidents and complaints and all of that, and that's really a footy, right? Like it's a passionate game we all love, and every sport, should I say. It's not just footy, it's more just the more localized story, or the more recent one. But we seem to rise above that. And so we're the support network, the CSO's the support network, club development officers from the league at the network, and they're there to support. So there's heaps of support for the user. But in theory, if they're a competent club CSO and they know what they're doing, they may not have to speak to anyone. As I've seen several of the clubs in our league, they didn't need to talk to anyone. They just needed to follow the platform, answer the questions, realize they haven't done something, read the recommendation, see what it should look like, download the thing, the policy or the whatnot, and then do it. And then they've been able to complete it and complete through the AMM. So that's our vision. Is ideally you want to be able to do it yourself, and we're trying to gamify the platform and make it, because we built it for small businesses. That's why we think it's uniquely appropriate for clubs, because it's simple. It's not this complicated, massively complicated system. Traditionally enterprise governance, risk and compliance systems are necessarily complex and super expensive. And that was our whole objective. We want to be simple and affordable for everybody to use it. And so that seems to be landing well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got no doubt it would. And all right, before we go, so what about 10 years' time? What's the goal with Safeguarding You? Do you want to be the standard bearer internationally? Yeah, if you take away any sort of humility, give us the full, gusto of what you'd like to get done with this business, mate.
Yep. Yeah. Look, we want to absolutely. We want to safeguard kids all around the world. Because we come from an international business background, and it's sort of how we started this tech build into the reg tech. And we made a huge mistake when we knew nothing about tech. We were like, oh, we'll go global. Then realized, no, you've got to go very focused. And so we've come back to, let's focus on Australia. Let's really solve a problem here. I think New Zealand probably next or sooner than later because there's obviously very strong ties with New Zealand, the UK equally. The US we'd love to get into, but we know the US is a very broken market. It's not just simply go into the US, it's a much more strategic approach. And we've got a lot of history in the US too. So I used to live over there when I was 21. So I know the market very, very well. I'd love to get into emerging markets, right? I think our product is equally valuable in the emerging markets of the world, whether or not we'll be able to crack that nut, because often this comes from a regulatory perspective. So if markets aren't as mature enough to recognize safeguarding as a standard per se, it might be harder to get into there, but that's our objective. We really want to solve this problem for everyone everywhere, really. Asian markets, clearly, but for now, it's nail Australia, get into the New Zealand, the UK, consider a strategic approach into the US, and then see what comes.
Adam, congratulations with what you're doing, mate. It's a sensational thing. I think there is just such a glaring gap in the market that you're filling. And as you said, to be able to do this in a way that is simple enough that people actually do it, rather than people just sort of skim through and tick a box and then say, oh, yeah, well, we did that. But to actually make it tangible and malleable so that it is implemented and so that ultimately there's a benefit for the kids involved in our sport and they are safeguarded.
Mhm.
Adam Wood, thank you so much for your time, mate. I very, very much appreciate it. Congratulations with everything you're doing.
My absolute pleasure, Lockie. It's been awesome, mate. Thank you.